I want to give an overview on what I learned during 9 years of teaching with video. Different sorts of videos, different ways of applying video. It turns out that actually I created 3,000 videos on YouTube, this kind of Kant style videos. And on top of that, a number of MOOCs on, for instance, wind power, human-computer interaction, mathematics, and again wind power. This is how I learned about video, what video might do, can do, and can't do. This is what I want to report on today. Didactics, style, and technology. First things first, of course. First it's about teaching, then it's about graphics design. Why would we be using video? Properties that video has in contrast to text that make it suited for specific kinds of content, specific audiences possibly. It's easier to show processes, for instance. This video is about a certain kind of motor or generator. I want to describe how the magnetic field leads to a certain electric field, which leads to a certain current, which again leads to a certain magnetic field, which leads to a force, and so on and so on. That's really hard to do in text. In a video, you can develop these things. You can point, you can tell while you are drawing. This is far easier with a video than with text. Video employs both the eyes and the ears. Video can be very conversational, informal. You may do that with text too, with a personal letter, but not in a book. That would look very strange in a book. And maybe that's some surprise. Video can be focused. When I start with the very first steps of an explanation, there's an empty page, an almost empty page. In a book, you would never have, or very rarely have, an almost empty page. No distractions on that page. So video can be more focused. Often it isn't, but it can be more focused. And the main reason to use video, of course, is that students love it. And we hope that we can, so to speak, catch our students by using video. Video can even be addictive. So students can love video way too much. This is a comment that I got on my video series on general relativity. Somebody wrote in, he watched these videos in just 3 days. So maybe this is the kind of enthusiasm that we want to generate with our videos, but this may not be what we can achieve all of the time. If you look at who this student is, what the background of this certain student is, that's hardly your typical freshman. So this is a student age 32 in a master's degree. This is not your regular student. We are dealing with lots of diversity, as we always are in our study programs. Diversity is hard to tackle. It's a difference whether we are teaching a graduate course in psychology or whether we are teaching freshman electrical engineering. Videos may work for the former, but may not work for the latter, or a specific sort of videos may not work or may work. Students tend to have poor strategies for learning. They tend to rewatch videos, they tend to reread rather than solve problems. Take quizzes, for instance. And videos are based, of course, on digital media. We need notebook, computers, tablets, smartphones. These devices are dual-use devices, if you will. For some students, these devices are great for learning. They are accelerators for education, but for other students, these devices suck up all attention that the students may have. So diversity, as always, is hard to deal with. One major aspect, one major difference that we see, that I see in the use of videos is the amount of procrastination. For some students, anytime and anywhere means now. I'm going to watch these videos right now, possibly all of them. But for some other students, anytime and anywhere means never ever. They may think they're going to watch these videos sometime in the future, but as it turns out, they're going to never watch them. And if you provide lecture recordings, that's a well-known phenomenon, students may choose to not attend your class. And hence, you lose the effects of the presence in the class. Procrastination goes hand in hand with binge learning. Many students tend to procrastinate during the course of the semester, and In the days before the exam, they are going to use all of those videos. This is what I know from my own students. They are telling me they are doing this. Not all of them, but many of them are doing this. They're consuming, literally consuming, not watching or working with. They're consuming all these videos in the days leading up to the exam at increased speed. And possibly that's what I think they do. Possibly they are not fully focused on those videos. They're chatting on WhatsApp and so on while watching these videos. Just watching videos doesn't cut it. I don't want to go into each and every bullet point on this slide. Obviously, this is what my grandmothers would have known, and research has found out the same. It's not okay to just watch videos. You think you've learned something, but actually you didn't. Lots of research on that. This is a more concrete number. So in this work, the estimate is that if you do, say you take quizzes, you solve problems, if you do and compare that to just rewatching or extra reading, you gain 6 times more by doing than by watching or reading. So we do not want just to use videos. We need more than videos for learning. And it's, again, no surprise. You learn from reactivation, from repeated memory reactivation, and you learn from testing, learn by testing. This is a very interesting phenomenon. Testing not just serves to make you aware of that you didn't learn or that you learned. Testing also helps in learning by retrieving something from memory. Facilitate the retrieval. There's even a pre-test effect. If you test something completely different, your brain is more open to learn something immediately afterwards. Testing is very beneficial. Videos should go along with tests. This is why I call this slide Videos plus X. We need more than just videos. And the usual suspects, if you will, are online quizzes, electronic quizzes, for instance, multiple choice tests, discussion forums. And what I've been using for the past 5 or 6 or even more years, flipped or inverted classroom. The students should be watching those videos up front before I meet them in class, which means that in class I have much more freedom. I do not feel compelled to do the regular teaching. We can concentrate on quizzes, for instance, on problems and other things. Videos plus X sounds good. We need more than videos. We need, as it's called, active learning, not just passive video consumption. The problem is active learning is not what most students I'm saying, some may, but most students do not like active learning. There's a strong aversion against active learning. If you do not just consume videos, if you really study with videos, this takes time, much more time than just watching those videos. If you take those quizzes, this takes time and it's frustrating. You're going to learn that you are not able to solve that quiz. And discussion forums, if you ever tried discussion forums with your students on these discussion forums, you're forced to elaborate what's your question, you're forced to discuss. Many students refrain from doing so. There are many ways in which we can try to foster active learning. All too well known, I've written here. You can explain the purpose of why you want the students to be using active learning. You can approach non-participants and so on and so on. But none of these measures really is a panacea. It's very tricky to get students to like active learning. The most basic idea to get students to like quote-unquote active learning is to put it into the examination regulations. So we do know from research that if you force students to take quizzes or if you award extra credits, in German we say Bonuspunkte, if you award extra credit for quizzes, that's going to work. Maybe you can also award extra credit for students who contribute to discussion forums. Maybe you can require attendance in the flipped classroom. In Germany, that's hard to do. Maybe in Switzerland, you can do that. So first question is, are you allowed to do so? At my own university, All of this is pretty hard to do. In Germany, these things are pretty hard to do. I do not know how this is in Switzerland. That's the first question. And the second question is, would it actually help? Can you require the students to use active learning, or would it backfire? Would they just write 2 sentences on the forum to get the extra credit for it, for instance? Or if you require all of the students to take quizzes, would that backfire so that another lecturer has a reduced attendance, for instance, in his or her lectures? Hard to say. There's much research required on this. That being said, I still use flipped teaching for these reasons. Without flipped teaching, I always feel this obsession to cover everything in a sort of encyclopedic way. And I also hear this in discussions with my colleagues. They feel compelled to cover the content, the subject matter. Nothing must be left out. There are no shortcuts. You have to cover everything. If you used flipped teaching, there's the videos online. These cover everything and you're done. You can do whatever you want in class. Highly recommended literature, didactic reduction. So flipped teaching liberates your classroom. You can do whatever you want, whatever seems meaningful and is meaningful in the classroom. You can have way more feedback from the teacher to the students and from the students to the teacher. You can see what students are doing all of the time. In those instances where you, in earlier days, lectured, you can use that time to see what students actually are doing. And there is more focus. If you walk around through the classroom, you get more attention of the students. And what I like very much is that smartphones and tablets disappear from the desks or are actually being used for work. Some things that I learned to finish this section on didactics, some things that I learned in all those years. For 5 years or so, I recorded each and every one of my classes. That took a huge effort. This is how those 3,000 videos came into being. I recorded each and every class in small pieces. It's not chunks of 90 minutes in small pieces. The problem is if students can rely on these recordings being available, they tend not to attend class. So what I do now is I record quasi-randomly, so to speak. Students cannot be sure up front whether or not I'm going to record something in class. And another thing that I learned, traditionally you would start with foundations, with theory, the basic notions, the basic definitions in mathematics. This is something that most students, do not like at all. They find it very, very boring. So what I try now is that I start with genuine exam questions. I'm telling my students, this is an exam question from last year. Now we are going to try to solve this one. And while doing that, while solving this problem, I try to interleave the necessary theory, the necessary foundations. I guess that works far better than starting with the foundations. If you look at literature, you mostly find the idea that you should motivate your students for them to gain mastery. First, they should be motivated and then they're going to learn. What research has shown, often it's the other way around. First, you have to have the mastery, and from mastery comes motivation, which means, for instance, that you have to start with things that students can tackle. Something they are able to do. This will cause motivation, and then you can build on that motivation. Start with mastery. That's an important thing that I've learned. This is, for instance, in mathematics, this boils down to doing something that the students can accomplish. If you start way too complex on a level that the student can't follow, you're lost. This kills motivation for most students. There's some students who like it, but most students won't like it. Start with mastery. Start from a point where students can do what you want. Final thing about didactics. At least in German-speaking Europe, constructivism has had a great impact. We have been trained as teachers, we've been trained to feel guilty about telling students, about explaining to students. Students, this is what we learned, what we have been taught, are being taught actually. Students should be discovering the subject matter. What research shows us, it's okay to explain. You do not need to feel guilty about explaining. It's okay to explain. If you do not explain, students feel like in a jungle. There's too much to attend to. You do not know what to look out for in the jungle or what to focus. You need to structure your subject matter. And this is a result from PISA. So the score gets better if the teacher explains a science idea and how it can be applied, in contrast to if the students are designing their own experiments. It's okay to explain. No problem if you create videos with explanations. Don't feel bad about it. Style. The style on the right hand, that's what I'm doing. This is the Khan style, Salman Khan. If you look closely, you find his name here. Hand-drawn slides on a blackboard, not on a whiteboard in his case. If you compare this to regular animation, 3D animation, the 3D animation looks perfect, great, Hollywood-like, but actually maybe overwhelming. I do not like it. It's very costly and it may be overwhelming. What I'm doing, also for reasons of cost, is this freehand style, hand sketch style. Another aspect of style, what students love is this hectic style, much ado, in contrast to the right-hand style, very calm, which I love. The left-hand side, these are two guys from Germany traveling around and conducting physical experiments on stage. Actually, it's not so much about the experiments, it's about they are running around, they are teasing each other. There's blood, there's explosions, there's noise, lots of ado. Students love it, many students love it. I guess far fewer students love the style on the right-hand side, which I love, what I call hypnotic calmness. These are Spanish lessons, Spanish with Paul. He types a single word, explains the pronunciation of that word, explains the meaning of that word, asks a question, waits for some seconds, then the next word, and so on and so on. Very, very hypnotic. I love it. Maybe this is not for my students, maybe this is for me more than for my students. I tried to create a video on logarithms in this style. Very, very small steps, one step after the other on logarithms. Well, it didn't get hundreds of thousands of views so far. Maybe this is not for students, maybe this is just for me. What's the best to work in terms of didactics? I would suggest the right one. I've seen no study on that one. We have to have a study on that one too. What's the best in terms of didactics? Most probably the calm one, not the hectic one. There's a huge body of research on multimedia learning. Richard Meyer is the name to mention here. Meyer has compiled a number of principles, as he calls them. Have a look at that book. Highly recommended. Reduction, reduce, reduce, reduce. No extraneous graphics, no extraneous audio, no redundancy. I wanted to keep this brief. The image principle should be show a face of the lecturer or not. I experimented, for instance, with a transparent whiteboard, virtual transparent whiteboard with a faked hand. This is not my actual hand, this is the image of my hand. It really doesn't seem to matter. Showing the face of a lecturer takes lots of effort. You have to think about lighting. It's far more difficult to edit because the head may jump from one side to the other and so on. It's very costly that way, showing a head, but it does not help much concerning didactics, concerning learning. What's hardly covered in the literature is the voice. Maybe because it's so hard to quantify. This is a comment that I got on Facebook. Makes me blush a little. How do you do research into such effects of the voice? The hint of a smile in the voice, the intonation. How do you turn that into numbers? Maybe because it's so hard to do research on that, to quantify these effects. Maybe this is why there's so little research. And maybe voice is very, very important, but not yet covered. There's the idea carried out by a number of papers to look at the most popular YouTube videos and reverse engineer them. Can we learn from those popular videos how to create a popular video? So, for instance, in this paper, the results are use a higher resolution, use more static pictures, use more, note more, background music and so on. I wonder whether we can trust those results. What does make a video popular? Can you collect statistics on these parameters and guess from them, estimate from them why this video is popular? Maybe there's more to it. Some very, very fancy ideas about dramaturgy, for instance, the voice, and stuff like that. Maybe you cannot measure what makes a video popular. And what makes a video popular? How do you get up there on that list in YouTube? Maybe you simply bought those views, or maybe you used the right terms in your description, and so on and so on. It's hard to say how those videos get top ranked. And most important, and something you hardly know, if students like the videos, did they really learn? Or did they think they learn? Or did they like the entertainment? Hard to say. So I would be very careful about reverse engineering popular YouTube videos and trying to guess what makes them work, what makes them popular. To come to a close with the style part, it's not just about explanations. Video explanations are a big chunk of what we see on the internet and what I do. There's more. There is worked examples, what I mostly do these days, problems solved from A to Z, procedures like how to stitch a wood. You can film discussions among students, discussions among other participants. Maybe student work. Should students create their videos? Maybe, if you want to invest the time. Case studies in social work, for instance. You visit as a teacher, as an educator, you visit a family, talk with the family, show how they live, the situation, and so on. A case study. As a video, not just explanations. There's way more than just explanations. Technology. I spoke about the jungle that we have to help students getting oriented in the jungle to alleviate the cognitive load. We want to reduce distraction. What I'm using is an electronic whiteboard. So this is what my students see in the video and see on the data projector. And from time to time, this being mathematics and engineering, I have to do some computations. I'm using Octave, that's some open source variety of MATLAB. There's another window for that. This is it. No user interface, nothing whatever on the screen in the video to reduce distraction. The user interface is on my smartphone with all the buttons that you can imagine. Reduce distraction for the student, but also reduce distraction for the teacher. I have some indicators telling me whether the recording is well and alive, so that I know I do not need to intervene. Technology is up and running. Over time, I've developed my own software, so the whiteboard and the remote control. There's another one, a video editor to go along with that. So this does not look like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut. It does not show a film strip. It shows the recognized speech, and it shows in colors the different phonemes. So that's a shameless plug for my software, which is for free on my website if you want to try it out. Lean software, lean hardware. This is the equipment that I've been using for 4 years. Now I've got a newer tablet PC, but still a Windows-based tablet PC I'm sitting in front of. Plus a USB microphone, never use the built-in microphones. They pick up too much noise, they are too poor. So these are my suggestions in terms of hardware and software. I try not to do recordings in the office or in the studio. This takes way too much time for me because I say a sentence and I don't like it. I repeat the sentence and so on and so on. This is what happens to me in the studio. I try to record in class. I'm more focused, hence there are fewer edits necessary. If you're in class, you're in front of the audience. There's, so to speak, stage presence in front of the audience. You are more motivating. That's better for videos. And I can have the students find mistakes and correct those mistakes while I do the recording. So in the recording, I can also correct those mistakes, not 3 weeks after the fact. And because as I'm recording the flipped classroom, I include quizzes and problems. I pause the recording, I have a look at what the students are doing, what the problems are, what the ideas are, and I can incorporate what I learned from that on the fly within the same video. I got tons of talks, papers and software if you're interested on my webpage. Thank you for attending.